My daughter asked me about it yesterday. It's bubbling up all over the place. Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle.
Because the interesting thing in this case is very little of the controversy is related to Sydney Sweeney herself or anything controversial about her.
Was it a branding misstep, or do you think it was a strategic sort of lightning rod for brand lift?
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hey everyone, Kelly McGuire with Vujade Digital. Excited to get into today's topic.
Hey everyone, Todd, Juno, Kelly's partner, and today we're going to jump on the news bandwagon and talk about Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle and what in the world is going on there. My daughter asked me about it yesterday. It's bubbling up all over the place. It's been big news for the last week, so I suppose we should talk about it. So I have 5 themes, Kelly, that I am going to frame up with a pro and a con and a debate points for you to kick off on, and then I will jump in as well. I mean, this is a pretty clear story, but for those of you who might listen to this, who don't know what's going on with Sydney Sweeney, she was in an ad for American Eagle jeans, Jeans, denim jeans. There was some hyperbole and nuance linked to her genetic genes and the perfection of said Sydney Sweeney. And so the internet took to the storm of debating that was probably not proper, even though some could debate it was good creative advertising. So we're going to talk about that. So let's first talk about celebrity branding. You and I have had the luxury of working on other celebrity programs and campaigns from influencers and the likes. So first question is Sydney Sweeney a good brand ambassador? So the pro to that is she's a big star. And so she's got billions of people who know who she is, even an old guy like me. She's got millennial appeal. She taps into nostalgia. She generates all this attention. But maybe some of her past affiliations or image could be in clash with maybe brand values or target audiences. And that might have come out in this particular instance. So the debate point around is Sydney Sweeney a good brand ambassador is whether or not brands should, in their vetting of celebrities, are they missing something? Are they not vetting? So do you think they're not vetting celebrities rigorously enough considering these types of things? Or do you think a lot of cases, and maybe in this case, American Eagle just said, hey, we're going to embrace risk here, and what we hope to get out of it is like vitality and growth and notoriety for it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it underscores what I would deem mostly a new reality for the most part, maybe not 100% new, but it underlines the polarization and the risk and the mindfulness that has to happen when these decisions are made, much more so than I think they've ever really had to be before. Because the interesting thing in this case is very little of the controversy is related to Sydney Sweeney herself or anything controversial about her or what she's done. She's a ubiquitous brand sponsor across so many different products right now. But it was the allusion to or the focus on aspects of her and the way it was presented in the ad, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it is the celebrity themselves that is polarizing or controversial and can create alienation. And so it's a really interesting way to think about it, where the whole point of using a celebrity, for the most part, it's rarely to impart that person's personality or values or alignment, or at least historically, I wouldn't say that was the most common reason that you aligned with the celebrity. It was really for recognizability and to draw attention and to draw eyeballs and to get people to stop scrolling or pay attention because you recognize the people you recognize. It's the same reason why if you go to an animated film where technically anyone's voice could work in the voiceover, you go after celebrities because it's the association with that name, that recognition, that validation that they impart, even though, again, it's not necessarily their voice that's needed in the animation. So it's a similar concept. It creates credibility, it creates attention, it creates, buy-in, and it's something to market around. But now more and more, rather than just saying who is the most popular or the most recognizable person that I can line with or can push through, you do have to sort of war game out the possibilities and the outcomes. And, we're in a more and more polarizing environment where one thing that appeals to 50% of people can oftentimes alienate the other 50%. And that's a really odd place to operate and have to think through and to go through. And, obviously Sydney Sweeney appeals to a very certain demographic and audience type and, aligns with certain brands and products that I think would draw that recognition. And again, it can just as easily go the other way. And I think you could say that about almost any personality. I mean, it's funny enough that even when you pick what I would call a safe personality, which historically I would have said something, for example, like Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively a few years ago would have been considered very safe. They were fairly universally liked, right? You have like a Paul Rudd or something like that, where it's rare to find people that are like, oh, I don't really like those people. But that's even going away now, right? Because Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively started to have some controversy that, certain people leaned into or interpreted a certain way. And so what would have worked, a couple years ago, even if you aligned, could have gotten off the rails. Unknown, no way to possibly know, no one can tell the future where that goes. And so there's not a direct answer to it, but I would say there's a level of scrutiny and consideration and thoughtfulness that you have to go to that I don't know that you ever had to really worry too much about that unless you were going off of what you already knew was a very polarizing personality in the first place. And sometimes, honestly, the last thing I'll say, sometimes that polarization can be a positive. If your brand does align well with 50% of the population or in a certain way, that controversy can be a benefit, but it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword, which side you fall on it. So some of the things you said are a great segue into my second point, which is really more about the persona of the celebrity or the actor and whether or not they just act? Can it still be an act? So for example, the pro side of this is she's an actress. She's playing a role. So she's acting. And she's doing that in a way to act as an actress. And it's not necessarily that the ad reflects her personal belief. She's actually doing her job as an actress. The downside of that is in sort of this world that we live in now where there's like, these parasocial relationships, public image is totally inseparable from the brand identity. So the debate point here could be, should audiences, should us, consumers, people, should we be able to separate the performer from the reality, right? And in this case, Sydney Sweeney, are people going to attack her personally? Are they just realizing she's just getting paid to be an actress in an ad and talk about jeans, not genetic jeans, but denim jeans? Should consumers be able to separate the two?
I think in a perfect world, there would be that separation. And I think that that's idealistic and impossible. It's just not the world we live in. I think there's too much information. There's too much online profile and persona and understanding and frankly, opinion and narrative that happens. It's going to be associated in every way. I think that's uncontrollable in that way. I would say before it used to be just the byproduct of recognizability and, appeal or alignment, things like that. But no, I think anytime you're going to align with a person, you're going to align with everything that's known and believed and thought about that person. And in a lot of ways, and like I said before, you're also, for better or for worse, you're also putting yourselves up with future outcomes of that person that can't even be known, which is, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about, you have to be a fortune teller to know, is this going to, downfall before? I mean, I'm pretty sure that when Adidas aligned with Kanye West, they didn't expect the Yeezy brand to be a $4 billion write-off ultimately in the future for them in that way. Things can turn on a dime in the environments that you operate in.
Well, you must be reading my mind because that's a perfect segue into my next debate point. Political fallout or other types of fallout. Do brands take a stand or do they stay clear of it because it's safe? So the pro to this is maybe brands that take risk are putting themselves out there and they're trying to cultivate, maybe a certain type of authenticity or courage or persona within an identifiable audience. Or the downside of that is they're going to alienate audiences on either side of the argument, and that's going to be significantly detrimental to the brand equity. In this case, American Eagle stock traded up 7 to 10% after Donald Trump made some statements about it, and this all came out. So American Eagle might say, hey, it was a risk, but we're up 10%. So it's a good thing. The debate point is, do you think brands should be looking at, to your point, who knew this was going to happen years later? Do they look at the short term and just say, what can we gain out of this in the next well, this literally for this project only and not worry about the long term of what could happen afterwards? Do you think that's too myopic to think about that? Or do you think there's probably good examples of brand relationships, brand celebrity relationships out there that have endured maybe a long test of time? Like there's celebrities out there that have been with certain brand endorsements forever, and you just naturally associate that brand. And in most cases, maybe those have done pretty well. There's no major conflict, but is it risky? Is the fallout worth it?
It's a bit of a quagmire of a question. I'm trying to think of how to be as neutral as possible as I explore the different possible answers to that question. Because, so when I say it's hard to be neutral, is I'm going to present considerations without necessarily my own leaning towards them or not, the best I can here. So there's a bunch of questions you have to answer for yourself and what you believe right and wrong or the good or bad approach is or whatever it is. I don't think there's a clear black and white answer here, because you can start out with simply saying, should companies be political or polarizing or appeal to certain demographics and group? Like that in and of itself isn't a clear answer. I would say a large amount of people would say, no, brands should focus on being companies and appealing to the broadest audience possible and kind of stay, again, as neutral as possible. The same argument goes with athletes all the time, where you look at someone like, people will say, well, LeBron James should speak out. He has a platform. He has an obligation. Other people's like, no, he should stick to basketball and he should focus on what he does. And so everyone has an opinion and viewpoint of right and wrong and who gets involved and who doesn't. And so I think that's a brand decision to be made. And that comes with the risks and the rewards of doing that, because there are risks and rewards with every decision in that, right? And interestingly enough, kind of goes back into what I would say is brand culture and corporate and company values and, you know, the why of things and the what drives a company, right? I would say that some companies are very personality driven from people and founders and things like that. You know, you have your Teslas and your Elon Musks and your things like that. And you have others that are more product focused and neutral. And so I think there's a decision to be made on where you go, and you have to accept the ups and the downs of that. If you decide to enter that arena, you can use it to appeal to what you want to appeal to, but you're going to have an alienation in that. And there's going to be backlash to that. And some people are going to inherently, you know, go everything from that's wrong to you may be called pure evil, or they may set your cars on fire in a parking lot if they really think that it's gone too far on those things. And so, or you can do your best and stay neutral. But again, you're not going to please everyone. There's going to be a group of people that says in being neutral, you're taking a stance and you're not standing up and you're not going into what you should be. And so like I don't think we live in a world where there's the ability to not offend anybody. And I know that's one of the things that people have a lot of problem with is everyone's going to be offended in one way or another. There's really no universality that can be had, which is kind of sad when you think about it as the whole. So that's a roundabout way to say, I think that's a very personal question for each person to answer with their values and their beliefs and what they want to support. And the one nice thing about capitalism and democratization, all that is consumers vote with their dollars, right? Like they kind of say what matters to them and what they align with and what they believe with. And brands have to, I would say the most important thing for a brand is to try and follow a set of guidelines and beliefs and corporate values that matters to them, and to be able to support those and to not try and pander, to not try and leverage or capitalize on things that are outside of those values. I think that's when brands start to get out in front of their skis a little bit, is when they try and be opportunistic in a cultural way and tap in that doesn't kind of align with an overall vision. Because that's when you try something and you don't think about the ramifications, you have the wrong personality going in there. So it's hard to answer that directly, but I would say it should all come back to that central value, that belief system, that why we exist, who we are as a company, and what matches that overall would be, I would call it the safest way to move forward. But there's really no safe. There's risk in every single decision that is or isn't made on that front.
I wonder if people, well, I guess it would have just happened around the dinner table or whatever, back in the 1950s or 40s or something, you know, an old magazine ad for something. I wonder if people would have commented on certain things. I think about that.
Yeah. And let me say one other thing, and I don't know if this, you know, derails you from your next question or anything, but the problem with what I said there is it's a very neutral answer to try and have an idealistic view on it. It doesn't tap into what I do believe is the fundamental need of advertising, which is to be attention grabbing, to be noticeable, to be able to rise above and break through a lot of noise. And that creates a problem in the environment we are. Is if you do try and not, like I said, not pander or capitalize or be sort of noisy, you can fail to break through and just be ignored, which is also a big problem. And so that's where this dilemma comes in. It's like there could be an opportunity, a cultural thing, like tapping into Sydney Sweeney being incredibly popular and being super creative with your ad copy and in a way that gets people thinking and talking, and you can lose control over that. But guess what? More people are talking about an American Eagle ad right now than I would say probably they ever have before in the recent history. But a double-edged sword. Is it going to end net positive? Is it going to be a Bud Light example? Is it going to be a positive upscale example? Is it going to be a Tesla example? It could go either way. So again, that's another decision you're making is, do I shy away from controversy and potentially risk being ignored and not breaking through? Do I lean into it and take the good with the bad? Like that's another side of it, because advertising is attention grabbing. And that's usually the best way to do it, is to be in the cultural zeitgeist and to be sort of shock value and those values. But that's being more and more risky. So I don't know that I'm giving answers, and more just posing huge problems that people have to navigate.
We're just here to debate the point. So that, again, you read perfectly into a good segue into my next theme. And you talk about being able to break through. And so this particular question's around the theme sex appeal. And here we are, two white, bald males talking about a young female in an ad. Sex appeal, regressive or strategic? Does it still have a place in advertising, or have we as a society evolved to a point where like that doesn't have a role anymore?
I mean, that's a cliche, right? That's historically been one of the biggest sellers.
And they used it in this ad, right? Look at her in her pose and what it's about, all this kind of stuff. Even the Dr. Squatch bathroom
bathwater
example that you explained to me before we got on air here clearly had sex appeal as a huge driver of it. So is that still relative?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's certain things that just universally, no matter what, tend to be good motivators and drivers of, I won't say good ads, I'll say effective ads, right? These are tried and true and they always work. Sex appeal has always been one of them. Humor has always generally worked pretty well. Emotional pulling on heartstrings has always been really, I mean, look, you can see these almost every year in the Super Bowl commercials, right? There is a theme that goes through. You try and be clever and witty. You try and be funny. You try and be culturally relevant. You try and be sexy. You try and be, again, heartwarming, the puppies, babies, like these are things that they are the things that tap into human emotion and generally go into things like there's a reason why people like cat videos, right? There's a reason why people respond to certain things. Like at the end of the day, you do have to tap into something that is going to distract someone from what they're doing. Because lest we forget, advertising is a distraction. Very rarely are people intending to be on their screens consuming advertising. You are distracting them from what they're really there to do. You're in between their TV shows, you're in between their cat videos, you're in between them talking to friends. And so in order to make that distraction worthwhile, you have to tap into something that is going to be worth that time and attention. And so you have to look at human motivators. So that's, again, where you get really interesting, that you have to think about what's going to be worth that time, but not going to offend anyone, that's going to, convey a message, that's going to go back to my brand, it's going to be the best. It's so many considerations you have to go through. I would argue, when all said and done, I heard this, it was a completely different scenario that I was talking about. I want to say it was about like presidential pardons or something like that. But the concept was, at the end of the day, whoever's making the decision simply has to be able to defend the reason and the why and the intention and having that vision, right? I think not doing things in happenstance and, without kind of half-cocked and not paying attention, but really saying, okay, I've thought it through. We've modeled it the best we can. We have a good intention. We have a vision. We have an audience it's intended for. We're not trying to be insensitive about certain things. And this is what it is. And again, you're probably not going to avoid all risk and controversy. But I think as long as you have a defensible position, and quite frankly, American Eagle's come out with a bit of that, right? They've pointed out the intention for it. Again, it's not going to satisfy everybody, but it's not usually the brand that's courting the controversy, right? It's other people that take it and manipulate it in their interpretations and what it means to them. And then it goes off the rails. So you just have to be able to either participate or ignore the conversation.
Yeah, their intention, I think, was supposed to be along the lines that great jeans, a really great made, well-fitting Gene is going to look good on anyone. And that was, I think, what they wanted to get across. But I would be surprised if someone there wasn't also thinking, oh, this is going to get us in trouble, but let's do it anyway.
I mean, honestly, this is where I'll wade into, I'm going to be very carefully not go down this slope too much, but a little bit of my personal opinion on this is one of the challenges that I think has made a lot of this problematic is this idea of inclusion has inherently assumed exclusion. And so the intent of something going after certain things by doing that, even if unintentionally, is you're not thinking about everything else that it could be exclusionary to. And that can be really hard to do. You can have a vision and a creative vision and think, okay, this is going to speak and appeal and mean this thing. But by elevating or focusing on these aspects or these things, some people are going to interpret that by focusing on that, you're inherently saying everything that's not that is bad. And I think this idea that to include automatically means you intend to be exclusionary creates a lot of the problem that is very, very hard to navigate. I would be more apt to be offended or put off by someone who intentionally excluded versus unintentionally focused on something and therefore assuming that means that they're saying everything else bad. Because I think that's just too easy for everything to go off the rails if you read it into that way.
Probably so. It's a good segue into my next topic of sort of the whole backlash thing and the all of the fervor that came out, all the vitriol or whatever that's come out, the social media backlash or whatever part of it was. So again, the pro to that is a lot of the online sort of outrage and conflict or tension or whatever that happens doesn't always translate into a brand losing business. Sometimes it actually lifts up business and they actually benefit. The brand American Eagle and that name has not been in my conscious mind in years until this happened. And so now I'm aware of American Eagle again, and I'm not going to go buy their stuff. So, but my point around this one is, and as far as my little research that I did, American Eagle did make some statements about this. Do you think when their social media backlash is occurring, if you're on the brand side, do you just hush hush or do you come out and you defend your position?
Ooh, that's another really hard one. I would say there's no universal answer there. Either rule of thumb is I think it's very, very, very hard for brands to win social arguments in any way or to do anything but stoke flames and create problems. And quite frankly, it's because brands have guardrails that people don't have. Brands cannot cross lines. They cannot do certain things. I mean, I shouldn't say cannot, but really should not. Like they have guardrails and sort of protocols they have to follow. People and what would traditionally be, maybe labeled as trolls online, they don't have those. People can say and do and cross whatever lines and do whatever they want. And so it's just not a fair fight. And so it's really dangerous to get into that fight. And it's a lot easier to do more harm than good. That being said, you can't always avoid it completely and you have to operate within those guardrails. It's very much not a fair fight when it's a company with a lot to lose and a lot of guardrails and it's people that kind of have their freedom of speech and can do whatever they want to do, however they want to do it without really the burden of proof or rationality even in a lot of ways.
They don't have to carry any of that. All right. So I want to wrap with this final sort of statement and question. So this whole campaign, it really entrenched or dug itself into sort of the cultural fault lines of what's going on in the world today around identity and political symbolism. Some people say that about her. It certainly capitalized on sex appeal again. It's blurring lines between, marketing and brand philosophy or ideology or a brand ethos or how they fit in culture. It did a lot of things. So one final opinion question for you was that, in your opinion, so far, based on what you know about this and what you've seen, was it a branding misstep or do you think it was a strategic sort of lightning rod for brand lift?
I think it's an unfinished book. So I don't think that there's a definitive answer yet. I would say as of right now, my gut tells me, based on what you said and what I know about the brand, it is a net positive for the brand. I fully believe that it is fully unintended by this brand. I don't think anyone ever envisioned even a remote interpretation of this way. And there were probably a lot of people very blindsided by this.
I totally disagree with you on that one. Somebody on that creative team knew this was going to do this. You can't write that copy and go, that's not going to be misconstrued.
I don't think anyone would have thought it would have gone to this degree up to the president.
That creative director's going, yes, I got the president of our country involved. My copy was so good.
When I say it's an unfinished book, I think it could still go a lot of ways. I think this could fizzle out. I think it could carry on a little bit. I think the brand could make decisions here. I think that they could lean into the controversy and capitalize on the 50% of people that can love this and create more polarization and just be okay with that. But again, that has short-term, long-term ramifications. They could cater to it or react and adjust to it. I mean, I could see a scenario where they run a campaign and start to take in other models and personalities that represent diversity and other things and say, we appreciate everyone's genes and everyone has great genes. And look at this. It's an element of inclusivity on that. Now, again, right off the top of my head, one element that's going to be lean into it and try and quell it. There's a whole group of people that will call that pandering and the wrong decisions and, whatever term you want to associate to it in this day and age. So there's really no winning on it. So it's an unwritten book in that, again, it could go everywhere from we won't talk about this or another week to they could stoke those flames and lean into it to they could controversy and could spin the whole other way. And people that don't like it now could love it tomorrow. So it's weird that a brand like American Eagle can be this cultural zeitgeist and this involved and have enough power to decide where to take this, but also not enough power to fully control where it goes. They can just make decisions that should go a certain way, but could fall off a cliff that's unseen at any moment.
Well, I think that's a good assessment. We're halfway through the book on this. We'll see what happens to them long term. Thanks. That was an interesting chat and an interesting subject that's still unveiling itself right now. We'll see where it goes in the next few weeks. All right. Thanks, Kelly. Good wrap. And I will talk to you on the next show.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.